Hello and welcome back to Rebound with Resilience, a podcast dedicated to raise your resilience, mindset, and mental wellness. If you're wondering why we're laughing, it's because we recorded for 5 minutes, or rather, I recorded for 5 minutes without pressing the record sign. So, yes, on this episode, we are joined by a friend, a very intense, probably one of my most intense and intentional friends, and full time business coach, Janice Tee. Hello, Janice. Hi.
Hi, thanks so much, Kevin, for having me on the podcast. I'm very excited to be here. And yeah, looking forward to sharing my stories.
Sure. Thank you for pretending that you didn't say that twice in the last 3 minutes. But yes, I'm very excited to learn as well. In fact, I think what struck me most, if I may share a story, the first time we met, or rather the only time we met, was at Chimes. We had a kind of a tea at Chimes. I can't remember what I was eating. It was a cake which tasted decent, but I was late for the meeting, right? For this meeting, and because I have a really bad habit, I hate myself, and I should improve. I was late for the meeting, and while we were chatting, where we had chat for a long period of time, and all of a sudden Jenny just said, "Oh no, we need to leave because I have another appointment soon." So I had to gobble down my food and leave. And then she said this line that really struck me. She said, "I cannot stand tardiness." So immediately when she said that, I was like, "Wow, okay." I felt the roasting, but
It
that's
wasn't you,
true, right?
though. It was more like me. I hate being late more than I hate people being late. But no,
Yeah.
tardiness is not good, guys. Yeah, be on time.
Thanks for the advice, Janice. I appreciate the advice. It is really true. I think that's what struck me about you as well, right? You're someone that's keeping your commitments. You are intentional with what you do, and you respect people in their time. And I think that what one of the ingredients for your success as well is that, and that exemplifies you. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about ownership, about intentionality today. If I could just share a bit of your story for the audience's context, right, as well as an outline of what we're going to discuss today. So Janice actually grew up not having formal education. So from 1 to 18 years old, she did not go to formal school, but she still got into NUS after that. If you're wondering how, later on she will share a little bit. But after that, she went on to work for a period of time, found that the corporate life wasn't for her. So she came out and started her own uh, business coaching company. And now she's doing really well. She also runs a fashion label, sustainable fashion label. And what strikes me about her, like I said earlier, is her intentionality and a clarity of thought. So you definitely, if you're ambitious, you're entrepreneurial, you want to do something more of your life, this will be a great podcast for you, and I'm sure you're in for a treat. Okay, so yes, let's begin. Yes, we are recording this
Thanks
time.
for the introduction, by the way.
Yeah, no worries. Welcome. All right, so let's get started. Right, I think we were going to talk a bit about your growing up and influences and education before we talk about your business. So growing up,
Yeah.
right, could you give us an idea of how was it like in a homeschooling process, moving to different countries as well? What was it like, and what were your feelings at a point of time?
So, well, that's a lot. So I'll guess by starting to say that, like, I think in my formative years, so if you look at 0 to 18, especially in the first, I would say 10 to 12 years of your life, where you're really just growing as a human being, right? The number one thought that definitely strikes me multiple dozens, probably more than that, almost every single day, right? You're reminded of the stark difference that you are not the same as everybody else. Like, you're different. First of all, every other kid that you know is in school, right? And it doesn't matter which country you're in.
Mm,
Most of the time, children go to school, kids go to school, students go to school, right? And you're just reminded that, oh, I'm not like all the other kids. I'm, I'm at home, like I'm doing my own thing. So that's definitely the biggest thing that was different, and you can see it and you can feel it. So it's not
yeah.
rocket science, right? It's something that you can see and feel.
Okay.
Um, but I would say that one of the biggest things that actually struck me while growing up is that I was very aware that I had a blank slate of paper, because ever since I was like 7, ever since I could write, right, I would have this thing called a goal card. So that's something my mom would give me. It's like Monday to Friday, and then you can fill it up yourself. Basically, you're learning to plan for your own day. So let's say you want to do 3 pages of math, and you want to read 2 pages of the English storybook, and you want to play for 2
Mm,
hours, right? You plan that yourself from 7, right? And it's like, oh, mom, I want to do X amount of pages for this, X amount of pages for that, and 2 hours of playtime. So the thing is that at the end of the day, if you don't complete that, right, you are responsible for it yourself. You can't be like, oh, my mom forced me to do it, my dad forced me to do it, my teacher forced me to do it. So you develop this sense of ownership, right, which is something that I'm very big about, right?
Sure.
You're responsible for your own time. So if you don't finish X amount of English and X amount of math, which you say you wanted to do, then don't be surprised when at the end of the day, you don't get the playtime that you also wanted, right? So it's an increased sense of freedom, but it's also an increased sense of responsibility. So if you can't take the responsibility, then you can't take the freedom, right? It increases together. And whether or not you're able to deal with that is something you have to figure out on your own. And you reap the full benefits, but you also reap the full responsibility. So that's something that I learned from a very, very young age, like 7, right? Yeah.
Straight off the bat, really, that is value given to anyone listening, right? And it's very striking because I can't speak for everybody, but generally working with youth, right? At least in Singapore, they're quite sheltered in that regard, where we kind of have everything provided to us when we are growing up. And sometimes parents can be overly protective of their kids, right? Not give them the ownership to make their own decisions. But at 7, you really had an idea of the cause and effect of your decisions and implications that you had. And definitely later on, we'll talk about a little bit more about it when we discuss ownership and intentionality. But elaborating on that, right? Like, how was that like for you? Like, in terms of, wasn't it difficult then to have that discipline? Because imagine, like, oh, I wake up and wow, I'm free. It's like you are technically self-employed since you were young. And you can, okay, let me do math. How does it work, right? Yeah. How does it work today? Okay, I want to read.
Yeah.
You go.
Okay, so I think it's not okay. So I think the whole concept of freedom is very warped because right now you might be coming from, oh, I was jailed out for 18 or 20 years of my life. And then now when I had a blank slate, I think, oh, I'm free, right? Because as opposed to before, I was restricted, now I'm free. Whereas if your whole life when you were growing up was just like that, that's like the default state of being. So you don't necessarily view it as I was locked up and then I'm liberated. It's more like that's just how life is. So that's the de facto norm, right? So learning to plan for yourself, that's one thing. But like you said, right, I think the other thing that was really instilled in me was that nothing is impossible because everyone starts from nothing. So if you look at any of the great sportsmen or the great chefs, like everyone started from zero. At one point they knew nothing, right, in life. And then after that, because of accumulation, because of knowledge, pursuit, and everything, they become who they are today. So everyone starts from nothing, which means that you technically could, if you wanted to, become anything, right? And that's something that my parents really instilled in me, which was that if you want to be, I don't know, if you want to be a chef, you want to start cooking at 14, you cook for 10 years, but by the time you're 24, how can you not be good at cooking after cooking for 10 years, day after day, nonstop, right?
Okay.
So it really doesn't matter what you want to do, but whatever you do, like if you can take a sense of ownership over it, but it's not overnight, right? It's through consistent, persistent, like efforts and routine and hard work that made that happen.
Sure.
But yeah, to answer your question, today, how do I do math? Like, how do you learn all of that, right? Back then when I was like 7, 8, right? The internet wasn't even a thing, which makes me sound so old, right? But it wasn't that long ago,
we are
right? So it's literally like you.
Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Don't remind me. Yeah, so it's like you literally, like I would literally go to the library. I remember looking at different sections like history, art, math, and I would just read a book on it. Like there's no one textbook, right, that can teach you about math. And if you don't like reading a book about numbers, then it's literally, you let me give you 5 pieces of candy. What if you have to share, your candy equally between 3 kids, right? Because I have 2 siblings, so there's 3 of us. Like, how does that work? So it starts from a very practical level. And I think it's really helpful for someone as a kid, right, or in your formative years to see the value of what you're learning. So it's not like learn math because it's important, learn science because it's important. It's more like, hey, if you touch the stove, it's going to burn you. Okay, so it burned you. Why does your finger change color when it gets burnt, right? So then you start to see the value of, oh, there's heat and all these things, right? And then you go deeper into that science knowledge and math, you get to see the real life application of it in your life. And because of that, right, you develop a natural curiosity and a natural
Right.
interest in the things around you. And everything around us has to do with math and science, if you think about all the products that we're using.
Right.
So I would say let me have seen meaning in whatever I was studying and learning about at that time, as opposed to, here, this is a book, learn it just because I say so.
Sure.
You know, that doesn't really motivate me.
That's interesting. That's really a strong point. I think a mutual friend, Dylan, Daryl's good friend, he's a lot talks about this a lot, like helping students find meaning in their work. It is true that formal education, because of structures, does kill curiosity to some extent, and I think that's quite sad, lah. You know, I think you know who Neil Grace Tyson is, right? It's a astrophysicist in America, quite a famous dude there. He shared something very interesting, right? He said that actually kids, right, you don't need to foster their curiosity. All you need to do is to not to squash it, because they already have it there in them, right? They already have it there. They see a puddle, you know, they want to jump into the puddle, whatever. But we kind of squash it, and we, you know, like you said, put certain barriers around people. So it's very interesting to note that because of your background, right, and the way you were schooled growing up, uh, that curiosity for learning and that understanding that education is beyond just your grades was already there, right? It was there, kind of ingrained. Um, Before we move on to NUS, right, as well as your work, so one last question on growing up is, what about social connections wise? I know you moved from different places, right? And social connection is one thing that people value a lot, especially as a youth, right? Um, Being able to be accepted or being, you know, in a group. How was that like for you? Yeah.
So I think it also stems from taking a sense of ownership, right? I mean, we live in a social world. No matter where you're in, whether you're in or out of school, you see people around you everywhere, right? You bump into kids at the grocery store, you bump into kids at the playground. It's whether about will you as a kid go up to another kid and say, hey, you know, you want to play together. Sometimes that's all you need. And like as friends, as kids, you don't care about social status, you don't care about, you know, color of skin, ethnicity, and stuff like that. So it's a lot easier, right? It's literally, do you want to play with me or not?
Yeah.
And I think I was that sort of kid. I would be like, I would just make myself part of their group, you know. And a lot of the times when you open yourself up, rather than, you know, act like you're better than someone else, whether you're an adult or whether you're a 7-year-old, most of the time when you open yourself up, people will be receptive to you. It's only when you close off yourself that people are like, you know, why should I be friends with you either? If you're closed off, right? So I think I just took that approach, and it's like, no one owes it to me to be my friend, right? So if I want a friend, I'll go and talk to someone, and there's only two outcomes. Either yes, they'll be my friend and play with me, or no, they don't want to play with me.
Okay.
That's okay, then I'll find another friend, right? Until someone says yes to being my friend. So in that sense, it's like nothing is owed to you. Nothing is owed to you that a textbook should drop on your feet and give you A's, right? Or a tuition teacher will like magically appear at your door and give you everything you need to know to score perfect grades. In the same way, it's like no one owes it to you to like you, right? And if you want to be liked, then the first thing is to be likable, right? And the funny thing is this, people always find it so hard. People talk about networking and connection, but there's a very simple rule of life, right? Which my grandpa gave me, which is just be a good person, be nice. And like the funny thing is, when you're nice to people, people are actually nice back to you, especially when you're nice to people and you don't want anything back and you just do it for the sake of it. It sounds a bit sad, but I think it's a bit rare in today's society, especially when we all get increasingly like transactional, right? If I give you this, I want to upsell you, or if I give you this, I want something back from you.
Right.
And if you're just nice and that's it actually shocks people, and people actually want to get to know you more. So I think that's something that I've done as a kid, but also something that I try to keep with me like even until now, because I think there's a lot of value.
I understand that. I wasn't expecting that answer, to be honest, Janice. You turned everything into a lesson, which is quite amazing. But I did not expect the answer, especially at 7 years old. I was not thinking about a lot of reciprocity. I wasn't thinking about, you know, the rejection and the law of averages, even in friendships, right? Which is quite interesting. So you really had in mind, okay, you know, you're not gonna be my friend. Forget you. Right, I'm gonna go to the next person. Okay, I'll not forget you, lah. Is it? Oh, okay. Maybe you're unique, lah. I don't know. But I do feel that, you know, sometimes, do you feel this is just something that I'm sure you would love people to challenge you respectfully as well? But sometimes people find it, I think, you know, environment does matter. I think we both kind of agree that environment does matter as well.
Sure.
And And it's for kids sometimes, right? I think for them to have that mindset straight off the bat, right? It's difficult. But I feel that it's slightly difficult. How do you think we can then inculcate that into kids, right? At that age.
Mm. I think the first step is awareness, right? Because if I'm not aware that there are other ways to make friends apart
Mm-hmm.
from, oh, only if someone invites me into their group, then I can be part of their group.
Mm-hmm.
Why not find a different group, right? So if
Okay.
I'm not aware of the possibility that there are more than one way of doing things, then I'll
Mm-hmm.
just stick to that one way, right? So I really think it starts from, of course, broadly society, but then I think it's the job of whoever the primary caretaker is to allow
Sure.
them to see that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is the way it's always been. But look, if this doesn't work out, the world's not over. There are other ways. But conversely, if the caretakers, and from a very young age, you're taught that, hey, there's only one way and this is the way, all other ways are bad, then obviously you grow up thinking that, okay, all other ways are bad. And even when you become like 16, 18, 21, or as a fully grown as adult, right, you still have this mindset that this one way is the way. And if I'm not doing it this one way, I may see people living other alternative forms, but I'll still always have that fear and that unease
Right.
that I'm not doing it that one way and that it's wrong. And our childhoods have so much impact on us, right? As individuals forming, that I just feel like it's crucial at that stage to say, hey, you have agency, you have a choice, you have options, and you can choose it or not and then bear full responsibility for it, right?
Okay.
But there are options.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that answer. I think you hit the nail on the spot, which is on that primary caretaker's role. Because I guess in your example of life, you had people that subconsciously or in some way inculcated that value of having options, or at least that self-image, self-efficacy, agency. But going across the board in society and just talking to youth, right? Sometimes they don't see that, unfortunately, because of maybe parental background. And even in school, the whole primary purpose of doing a program is actually what you mentioned earlier, to raise awareness that there is options, but the clutch of environment and sometimes strong lah. That said,
Mm.
I think it's no excuse for us to of course improve. So that is what we're going to talk about moving forward. Uh, so of course, with that mindset of agency, right? That's, I believe, one of the reasons why you applied to NUS, um, with some faith that you could get in. So could you share that process, right? You had no formal certificates, and okay, first of all, maybe why do you decide that you want to go into university, right, in NUS, and then how do you go about doing that?
Okay, so why it really stemmed out of necessity, because there was one summer, I think I was like 16 or 15 plus. I came back because my grandma was sick. Okay, so I
Okay.
came back to Singapore for an extended period of time, maybe like half a year. I can't remember exactly how, but it was long enough, right? And I wasn't in school at this point. So I thought like, hey, you know what? I want to work a summer job, right? And so back then it was like McDonald's for $4 an hour. I was like, why not? It's across the road from my place, and I want to earn a little bit of spare cash so I could buy like books or whatever I wanted, right? Um, so yeah, again, these were things that my parents wouldn't buy for me. It's like if you want it, you have to earn it yourself, right?
Yep.
But anyway, I wanted to apply to McDonald's, and I realized that to work there full time, you need an N level cert or an O level cert,
Mm,
and I didn't have it. So
wow.
then I went to like Watson's and another frozen yogurt place, and they told me the same thing. To work there full time, you need like O levels or N levels. The actual grades don't matter, but you need to show them the cert.
I
I don't
see.
know if this is still the case, but I remember this is for full time. So part time, I don't think they really care. But back then, I wanted a full time role, and I realized that okay, like Singapore is really certificate slash paper based economy, right? Like
Okay.
even to work in F&B, you need to have a piece of paper. So I
Sure.
realized at that point that, maybe I can't go on like this forever. And maybe if I were to be in Asia, it would be a good idea to get some form of socially recognized piece of paper, right?
Mm,
AKA a university degree. So yeah, that was why. It was really out of necessity. And I
sure.
thought, hey, you know what? If I'm in Asia, to some extent, why not, have some form of social proof that can then open doors to other places,
Got
right?
it.
So that's why I decided to apply to uni. When we talk about the application process itself, I actually did not apply with some faith that I could get in. And in fact, I would say 99.9999%, just because I don't like to say that anything is ever impossible. But when I was applying, honestly, at that stage, I was like, Singapore is known to be how like rigorous it is in education, and the education system is brutal and all these things, and all these kids are studying so hard from PSLE to O levels to JC or poly to uni, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the epitome, the final leap of education, right? So there's no reason for me to believe that I could get in, and I didn't. But I didn't see why it should stop me from applying, because applying is literally one A4 blank piece of paper and a pen,
Yeah.
right? So there's no reason, even if I think I can't get in, why I can't apply, right? It's like if I write to Obama today, will he reply me? No, but it doesn't stop me from potentially writing in if there's something I want to write to him about, right? So that was really my mindset when I
Okay.
applied. Yeah, so I wrote 3 letters to NUS, NTU, and SMU at that point. But then I think the intake for Singapore schools is like maybe around March or February. I think that's when people generally apply. But in US, which I was also considering, because I thought like, hey, there's no way that Singapore is going to be open to this kind of ideas, right? So I was also preparing at the same time for the next intake. I think in May or something like that is when people apply for US schools. I can't remember, but it was
Mm,
after the Singapore intake, right? So
sure.
I was just preparing for university in general. I thought, hey, let's apply for Singapore. If Singapore doesn't work, then let's apply for US,
Mm-hmm.
right? The reason why I applied for Singapore was because it was cheaper because I'm a citizen, right? So obviously
Yeah.
studying local is going to be makes more financial sense. So yeah, so I wrote and I wrote it actually. I had a handwritten letter to the deans, right? It was the same letter, slightly tailored to each school. But
Mm,
the thing is that my draft was handwritten, so I actually can't remember what exactly I wrote. I
okay.
think eventually I did type it out, but I didn't. I just like copied it from a handwritten letter to literally print it. And once I printed it, I actually didn't even think of saving a copy because I never thought that it would amount to anything. Like I never
Right.
thought that he would actually accept me.
Wow.
And I actually have no idea what exactly I wrote till this day.
Okay. Okay. I
But
see.
yeah,
You
but
can
I
ask
know
them if they have it.
I
I'm
don't
not
think
like probably
that
don't.
was Yeah, probably
You never know. It might be so
not. Actually,
interesting.
can we take that degree back? We
Yeah.
actually don't.
It might be so interesting that they kept it somewhere as like a museum exhibit. Then maybe
No,
they'll show it to people like, wow. Okay. But anyway, yeah. Carry on. Sorry.
yeah. No. But the only thing I remember that I wrote was I really was interested in behavioral economics. I was always interested in psychology and how people behave. And
Okay.
also like the economy, right? How does it work? How do people make money? How do I make
Mm,
someone give me money, for example? And I remember my opening letter was something about how when I was 8 or 7 or 6, I can't remember. I really was into stationery sets. So I remember I went to this store with my mom once. I wanted this stationery set, Disney or something. She
mm,
didn't want to buy it for me, so I threw a big fuss basically. And I went home. I got punished, right? The next week we went back to the same store, same stationery set, and I decided to try like a different approach. Remember, I was like 6.5 or something like that. Like
okay.
so I said, hey, mom, I know that money is very important. And I know that we should be prudent with our money, right? Or we should be wise with our money.
Yeah.
So I understand that this is not something that I need. And I understand why, it's not a necessary purchase. So my mom here is like, oh, look at my 7-year-old daughter. So cute and so mature. So
Yeah.
she decided to buy it for me as a reward.
Mm,
Right. And that's when I realized that, hey, the first time I said I wanted it, but not in a very nice way, I got punished and basically had privileges taken away from me. The second time, I actually said I don't want it and understand why I can't have it.
then you
But
got
the
it.
results are radically different, right? So that's when I realized that was, and I still remember it to this day. It was the first time in my life I realized that you can say the exact same thing in 2 different ways and you get like radically different responses.
Mm,
Right. Which also means that you can teach someone the same thing from a textbook. Someone can read one line, act on it in a very, very different way, and get super different extreme results.
got it.
Right. That was what hit me. And that was, I think, the opening analogy that I gave in the letter. But apart from that, I don't remember
Yeah, I mean
what else I wrote.
I mean that's a good
Yeah.
hope, right? I guess that hope kind of draw them in, and so you did enter NUS. We were given a position when you first got the acceptance letter. What was the feeling? Was it that 0.001% of you was elated, surprised?
I actually went. So I think from April to June, I actually went to volunteer at an orphanage in Chiang Mai in Thailand. teaching people English because I just wanted to remove myself from city life. Everyone else around me was stressed out about A levels and uni acceptances, right? I was like, this is too much. So I went there. The thing is that village was so remote that there was no internet. So I actually only went out once a week or once every 2 weeks into the city where I had Wi-Fi. So the thing is, when I got accepted to NUS, I didn't even know. Like I didn't even know until a week plus later.
Okay.
Because even though my mom WhatsApped me, I didn't have Wi-Fi to receive it. So I had to go to the city, get Wi-Fi, and then realize, oh my God, I got accepted. But then on that same day, although I was super happy, on that same day, it was also within 24 hours was the acceptance deadline.
Oh.
So I was like, how do I do this? I was not taught how to accept a uni thing. I heard from other friends later on that, like, if you're from JC, there's 3 buttons, and then you just click the one you want, and that's it. For me, it's like, I have to log onto the portal. I don't even know where I went. I went to admissions. I wrote into the school support. I wrote to every single person just so they know that, hey, I'm actually super happy. It's just that I'm not sure if I did the acceptance steps right to get matriculated. And by the way, what the hell is matriculation? I've never heard of it either, right? So
really?
Yeah,
Sorry. Forgot.
By a brief stroke of luck, right? I managed to like get accepted just fine and like submit my particulars and everything. But I remember I was more stressed than anything because I was like, I will kill myself if I actually got this opportunity, but I missed it because I didn't matriculate, you know? So so it was a very pleasant surprise, but it was more like a flurry of stress first.
Okay.
In reality.
Great. Wow, that's a great story. You have so many stories. I feel like we're gonna run out of time for this podcast. Okay, let's try and move on. That's because I want to get to the meat, which is the intentionality part. So in school, just briefly, right? Just really briefly, what was the difference between, say, formal education and all along the education that you grew up with?
Okay. It's very different. The first thing that you notice is I used to be solo, and now there's like a few thousand people around me in school, right? And then there are teachers now too, right? So first is like the social environment that I had to adapt to. I just wasn't used to having like that many people around me. Being like a solo person growing up, right? I was like, wow, there's so many people. The other thing is that everything is structured to some degree. So there's fixed times for fixed classes. You can't just go see a lecturer anytime you like, right? Because they might have a schedule too, and they might be in a different lecture. But as much as I could, I tried to play around with the timetable. So I know that you can choose like certain modules, and those modules will have certain days of the week, right? So I tried to batch everything in 2 or 3 days so that I will only be in school 2 or 3 days. And the rest of the days were pretty much up to me, like how I wanted to study. So I was able to find ways around that. And also I realized that, hey, even though professors have fixed consultation hours, who's to say that you can't just go off consultation hours and ask them if they would be happy to have a chat? Most of the time, and I'm not saying like professors have nothing to do, right? But most of the time, they're actually really into whatever they studied, and they would be more than happy to have a chat with you if you show genuine interest. So a lot of people are like, how do I get access to this professor? They only have like 2 hours consultation time, and there's like 200 students, right? Who's to say you can't just hit them up in the canteen? Or who's to say you can't just knock on their door and ask if it's okay, right? So I think I applied my own ways of learning within a structured environment as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's a huge lesson also. Even people listening to this might be involved in formal education. For me, my experience was really similar. I think after my A's, my paradigm shifted towards formal education. So just like you, I was packing things into 2-3 days, knowing that had to do things outside to reach my eventual goal. So because I had that goal, I reverse engineered it, and I knew that I had to do that, just as how probably you had your own goals as well. And one thing about this point is that you have to work, like you said, sometimes out of boundaries or push the boundaries a little bit and think from principles instead of just like following the book directly. Like what you mentioned, right? The principle is that professors do care and they do want to talk to you if you show interest. So anyone listening to this, right, I think to make the most of formal education, it's not perfect, but you have to get clear of your outcomes and work your way around it, not be too rigid in the way you think as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure, right? So moving on, of course you graduated. You did well even. Let's not go in there. If not, take so long, but you did well. You got first class honors? First class honors, right? Yeah. Amazing. I okay, never mind. Let's I'm sure you worked very hard for that. Yeah.
It's just a
So you got
piece of paper. So everybody remember, it's just a piece of paper.
okay. Yeah. Sure. Tell it to the people that didn't got the lowest around. It's like, yeah, like of course you can see like your first class
Paper.
honor. Yeah, yeah, I know, I know. It is a piece of paper. In fact, you did apply to do a work in a corporate world for a while. Um, I have to probably keep this segment short because I want to really talk to you about intentionality ownership. For the viewers who are interested and you are maybe in a corporate position, you're thinking, or maybe I'm not sure whether I should start a side hustle to quit your work, right? You can go and
Mm,
listen to Janice's YouTube channel. She did a video over there
right.
on things to consider before leaving your job. But I think maybe in a nutshell, right, could you just explain to us the corporate life, what you appreciated about it, what you learned from it, and why you eventually decided to come out?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so corporate life, I learned a lot from it because I was working with I was given the opportunity to work with people within technology, specifically data science and analytics, which
Mm,
happened to be on the rise, right, the past 3 to 4 years. And I was very fortunate that, I was given like a good company, which meant that I was able to network with people from other good companies and just know like how big companies operate on a macro level. The fact that data science and artificial intelligence was so new meant that a lot of companies were setting up new divisions, right? So I was a part of that in helping them build and hire people for those new divisions. And I really wanted to understand like why. Why do you need an AI hub for a bank, for example? And I was able to see how the pieces fit together. So rather than just focusing on, okay, I'm supposed to find you someone for this new division, it's more like, why? How does this new AI division contribute back to the larger organization, right? So I was able to have the opportunity to see things a lot on a macro scale,
mm,
right? And that's something that I'm very, very thankful for. Because huge companies, you still need access to them in order to understand how they work. But I was able to work with a lot of very senior people who will literally be like, I have 10 minutes, what do you want? And this can be after I business developed and formed relationships and like spoke to them for 4 months. Finally, I get a coffee. They're like, I have 10 minutes. What do you want? So I also learned
mm,
to like really get to the point and really get to understand the heart of the matter to not waste time, right? And get to the point because that's how people are like when they're very, very time stripped. So I learned a lot from there. But I think, like I said, if you're someone who is considering leaving your 9 to 5, watch my YouTube videos on video on, the thought process, rational thought process that I went through. But I would say the biggest thing is this, right? You should never leave your job just because you don't like your job. Like you can't be like, oh, life is tough. I don't like my job. Therefore, I want to leave. Right? Life is going to be tough. If you think being an entrepreneur is easier than being in your job, I can tell you right now you're wrong. And you can speak to any entrepreneur who's had any form of traction or success. They'll tell you the same thing. You work harder, you work longer hours, you're probably more stressed out. Right?
mm,
So if you think life is tough, then I want to quit my job. Don't quit your job. But if you think, my job is great, I'm doing okay, but I have something else that I want to do and I don't know if I should pursue it, then watch my YouTube videos on the 4 steps.
mm.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
would say.
Yeah, Janice was rapping there. Took me a while to process what you shared, but I did eventually, I think, process that. So it is about again being intentional with outcomes and not just making sure it's not just an excuse lah. That to making sure it's not just a cop out. So obviously you thought through it
Mm,
really clearly, and I think we were chatting the last time. You were saying that you saw the potential value you could provide as an entrepreneur
yeah.
and how that probably get a greater return and reward satisfaction from that. So you moved on in doing that, and of course now you are doing pretty well. I would say, of course, you would say there's room for improvement. I mean, there's always room for improvement. But you're doing pretty well now. You have clients, and we have a mutual friend Ray as well that she seems to like you a lot.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah, she tells me about you as well. So she likes you a lot. But so it seems that your clients really see the value that you give to them. And just for viewers' context, what Janice does is that she helps new upcoming coaches or just small service providers to monetize their business or get them clear about their pathway to monetization or to improve the value they provide to the market.
Mhm.
Yeah. So with that, right, let's talk about business. Let's talk about business entrepreneurship. The first question is, what does it mean to live life intentionally, and why is it important?
Oh, it's so important. Okay. I love this because that's like what I breathe and live, right?
Yeah.
Why is it important to live life intentionally? Right? I would say that it's because when we think of life in general, right, especially as millennials or even younger, um, like we always think of life as this big thing, right? And we think we're so young that what we do now doesn't really matter most of the time. Like, so sometimes we have down days and we're like, today I just don't feel like it. Or sometimes we even have down weeks, right? And we're like, none of this matters anyway, because who am I, right? Really, in a world of like in Singapore itself, there are millions of people. Who am I, right? My actions don't really matter. But the thing is, the thing that really stops me in my track is this, right? So imagine you're in a 9 to 5 job right now, or you're in school, right? And basically you end your day around 6 or 7, right? You have dinner, it's 8 p.m. now. Most millennials sleep like what? I would say 11. So imagine that you have 3 hours from 8 to 11. If you were to devote this 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., instead of watching Netflix or browsing through the endless scroll of Instagram, if you would just devote these 3 hours to your side hustle, right? Let's say you want to bake, you spend that time baking, exploring recipes. Let's say you want to do marketing, you spend that time exploring marketing courses. In one week, right? Just Monday to Friday, assuming you don't touch weekends, you create 15 hours. That's like about 1.5 working days, right? And that's actually close to 2 working days. 16 hours is 8 hours times 2, right? You create almost 2 full working days for you to devote on something, right?
Yep.
And as compared to someone who just devotes 1 hour of their time per day, which is already impressive because most people devote zero, right? So
Yep.
if you're really sure that you want to do something, you have to be intentional to set aside that time. And you can't just wish that you could be better at something, right? You have to set a concrete time slot where you do something actual to get yourself closer to that goal. And the difference is this, right? And this is why it's important. Because as compared to someone who spends 0 hours, the person who spends 1 hour is obviously going to learn a lot more. But compared to the person who spent 1 hours, then as compared to the person who spent 3 hours, it's literally this second person will move 3 times as fast as the 1 hour person, right? And if the 1 hour person takes 30 years to do something, right? So let's say you start at 25, you take 30 years, you finish at 55. The person who spends 3 hours will progress 3 times as fast, right? So let's say they only take 10 years instead of 30 years. So you start at 25, you finish at 35. You can retire at 35. Your success, it's like that much faster because it's exponential and
Compounded,
it's
right?
not it doesn't happen overnight. The thing is, they build one on top of the other, right? Like you said, compounding. And on top of that is that once you go at a certain rate, it becomes much more easier for you to maintain this certain rate. Whereas for someone to slowly climb up to this rate is a lot harder,
Yeah.
right? So the difference is that when you look at some people and they're like 35, right? You're like, how can this person possibly retire at 35? Their dad must be rich, their mom must be, loaded, they must have like some kind of unfair advantage in life, right? But why can it not be that they just work 3 times, 5 times, 10 times harder than you ever did? And that's why they'll achieve 3 times, 5 times, 10 times more success than you ever will. And the funny thing is that the people who are always thinking about, why can someone achieve this? How can it possibly be? These are usually, funnily enough, the people who don't actually take much action in their life, right? Because if you're an action taker and you're actually committed, you have skin in the game, into what you say you want to do, right? If you wish for it to happen instead of wishing, you're actually doing, then you'll be able to see the value that it brings to you, and you won't wonder how can someone be there at 35, because you can see it.
Got it.
Like you
Wow.
understand the concept of it.
Got it. Well, that's I can sense your passion through the screen. But that's a lot to unpack, right? If there's a lot to unpack, I would say that to qualify also the statement is that the premise or bottom line is that you want something more, right? Let's say someone says that they don't want something more, that's perfectly fine, right? Then you don't need to be
Yeah.
intentional with it because you don't necessarily want to get the results. But if let's say you want to get the results, or you're, it's important to you, then intentionality comes in because you have to put in the work, you have to put in the hours to compound it. Starting is difficult, but once you get the momentum, like you said, success breeds on it. The motivation loop goes again, and then usually there's an exponential growth. So
Yeah.
Janice put it the best possible way on the power and the value of being intentional. And I think what being intentional means is just being conscious of how you live your life. You live life by design and not by default. Be very conscious and reflect daily on it. There's one thing that the last time when we met, you talked about, I find it interesting, right? Is that you say that sometimes people are afraid to be honest with themselves or afraid
Yeah.
to admit that they're lazy, which is what you said earlier, right? And they may probably put someone on the pedestal and say, oh, you're rich or whatever. And then that gives them an excuse to not try. Yeah, can you elaborate more about that a little bit?
So, no, I actually think that
Mm.
people are afraid to admit to themselves what they really want. Okay. So, most
Mm.
of the times we say, oh, I have no choice. I was put in this school.
Mm.
On I have no choice. My whatever. That's why I end up here in this company. I have no choice. I studied this. My grades weren't good enough for me to get into something else. Therefore, in university, I studied this. So I ended up in this job, which I don't even like. Right. And you're like, I have no choice. I have no choice at the premise, right? C'est la vie, such is life. Life is not perfect. What do you think?
Sure.
But I feel that a lot of people, and maybe not 100% of the time, but I would say majority of the time, people admit to this because they're scared of the alternative. What if I said, my grades weren't good enough. I got into this course in university. I got this job, which I hate, but I have a choice to leave it and start from ground zero at age 27 while all my peers are climbing this one ladder, getting richer and richer, getting promotion after promotion. What if I had the choice to leave and start from ground zero, take another master's degree, and start completely afresh on something that I like? What if? Because now you've been working for 2 years, you have the money to put yourself through university, right? So it is an option, but I don't want that option because if I admit that, hey, I could be my dream career, that it's not impossible. It might not look as nice as I thought it would. It may not look as enticing. And I might fail, right? And while all my friends are just climbing higher and higher, if I take a second degree, I might only graduate at like what, 30,
Yeah.
31, while all my friends, are buying houses at that
Yeah. Yeah.
stage, right? So it's often because of the fear of doing what we want,
Mm.
right? Like if I admit to myself I have options, that means that I can say, oh, I can go to my dream life, but I choose not to achieve my dream life because I'm scared. I'm scared of other people judging me. I'm scared of failure. I'm scared of all these other things, right? I can choose my dream life. I can live my dream life, but I choose not to because I'm basically a coward. We don't like saying that to ourselves.
Mm.
We would rather say, no, I'm stuck here. I wish I could do that, but there's no other choice. I mean, I didn't get the grades that were good enough, and now I graduated with this degree, and now I'm
Got it.
stuck in this job forever.
Got
I
it.
prefer this option because it's more comfortable, right? And so
Mm.
that's what I mean by people being scared. It's not, and it's often not that people don't know what to do with their lives, right? Again, to this point of fear, right? It's not that people don't know what to do with their lives. If I were to tell most people, hey, you have 24 hours to live, tomorrow the world is ending, straight away you'll go and do the thing that you like. You already know what you like. You're not pursuing it, not because you don't know what you like, but because you're scared of something. It's not that you don't, you just prefer not to acknowledge
Okay.
it.
Just okay. Well, once again, I think that's a lot, but it felt very David Goggins like actually. I know, I know you're a fan of David Goggins. I mean, if I don't know who David Goggins is, I mean, we need another podcast to talk about him. But it's probably the most intentional, hardcore person on planet Earth. So you all can check him out. But I think the whole idea is that people sometimes are afraid to face themselves. They're afraid to face the truth. And like what Janice shared, I think the truth will set you free. It could also be that, again, we can discuss this, right? It could also be that maybe in our culture, especially social media, we are more rewarded nowadays for victimhood. The victimhood culture is actually research, by the way. We are socially rewarded for blaming or essentially for putting your plight online. Oh, it's horrible, things suck. And then people will like kind of tell you, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. You're good. And then you're socially rewarded for airing your concerns. So that could potentially lead to a culture where people don't take ownership,
Mm.
you know? And of course, it's not to say that you don't seek help. I think I need to qualify a little bit of what Janice shared as well, because circumstances do matter. I think we both agree that circumstances always matter because it in fact affects the way we think, but we can't control our circumstances. The only thing we can control is our intentionality and to put yourself in a different circumstance. All right.
Yeah.
So we're not invalidating your circumstance. Yes, it's tough, but you have to do something about it. You know. So, which leads us to the next point. As millennials, we talk a lot about, or actually Gen Zs now. I feel like we are. I cannot say that. Oh, you scold me, but I'm actually older than you. So I feel like wow, I need to keep up the Gen Zs, right, and their TikToks. But generally, millennials, Gen Zs, right, we want to do things our own way. There's more autonomy, but with that also comes the price of responsibility. Yes.
Mm.
Uh, Again, could I ask you to elaborate more about this?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the times, because okay, I can't speak for all millennials, but okay, I'll
Yeah.
speak for myself as a millennial, right? And
Yeah.
Gen Z, I would, okay, as young people today, right? We want things so quickly, and I feel like
Mm,
attention spans and our patience is just running thinner and thinner and shorter and shorter. This is not helped, and it's further exacerbated by the fact that we see people becoming 6, 7, 8, 9 million figures. Like people achieve what seems like overnight success, right?
yeah.
6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, millions of dollars, billions of dollars. It all almost seems like a game, right? And when we see this happening, we're like, why can't I do that?
Mm,
Right. um and I think that leads to a sense of like discontent just because we consume so much content, right? So much of this, it leads to this sense of, okay, I need to do that too. And
yeah.
not only do I need to do that too, but I need to achieve this overnight. So if I quit my job and 2 weeks later I'm like, why am I not seeing any traction? But it's been 2 weeks, right? Some businesses takes 2 decades to really build up,
Mm,
right? So when I say that, when we want things done our own way and we don't want to be doing things the old-fashioned way of like just pure hard work,
yeah.
you keep doing it for 10 years, 20 years, you'll be good at it. We understand that, but that's not what we want. We want
Mm,
to kind of work the smart way. We want to go around the loop and find some kind of shortcut where we can be rewarded for working smart and not just working hard, right?
right.
So we want to do things our own way. We find that traditional ways are often obsolete, and with the age of technology, it is true that there are new ways of working, right? And that's how my whole career is built on, like the
Mm,
whole digital economy. But I feel like, yes, you can do things your own way. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. That's great. But the thing is that when things don't go your way, right? Or when you do things your own way and something fails, your old mindset and most people's mindset still goes back to, oh, I never really wanted this anyway. Like, for example, if I quit my job and I try, okay, to set up an e-payments company, and that doesn't work out because there are people like Razer and Grab who are way more advanced, right? And I can't beat them. Then what I might do is after 8 months, I'm like, you know what? I never really wanted this anyway. It was more
mm,
like a little experiment, right? So I try to find an excuse where I don't have to clean up my shit, where I don't have to face with like, oh, I tried my best, but you know what? I still failed.
mm,
I don't even want to get to that point, right? So then most of the time we veil it with excuses. Maybe, oh, when you have a bad, co-founder, things just don't work out, right? Yeah. So we try to find excuses for failures
mm,
or for things that don't go our way. And I feel like that's such a mistake because it is actually when you analyze, right? When you're so-called courageous or brave enough, or when you have enough guts to really analyze your failures, that is literally the only way you'll improve. Like imagine if you're playing a game of squash, tennis, or badminton, and every
mm.
time you lose, you're like, oh, it's the weather. Oh, I feel a bit dizzy. Like you'll never
Yeah.
actually be
Yeah.
able to improve on your weak point, right? It's only when you're like, oh, okay, I lost. First,
Yeah.
I lost. Second, why did I lose? Then you can analyze like how did you play wrongly or how you could have played better. That is actually the only way you improve. So if you keep avoiding it or shirking responsibility, you will never actually become better. And what happens is you actually get stuck. And you get stuck, but deep down inside, even though you find an excuse to tell the rest of the world, hey, it's my partner, hey, it was just the timing, I never wanted it that much. Deep down inside, the biggest thing is that you are actually crippled with fear because you
Mm,
know that you failed, right? But you know that you're putting up a front. This, like, just, I feel like it just eats inside of you, and you'll never ever have the courage again to try something because you have no ability to deal with setbacks. You have no ability to deal with failure. And you can talk to any single entrepreneur, any single person who's been successful in your field, they'll tell
yeah.
you failure is not in the way, failure is on the way. So you know that the road to success, right? You'll see a tree, you'll see a plant, you will also see failure.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to be successful, failure is part of that. And if you
Right.
have no ability to deal with this, it just cripples you for life because it means that you'll never be able to see success,
Sure.
right?
Okay. Let me take a while to appreciate that. You did also write that a true sense of ownership means that when you do things your way, it
Yeah,
also means you pick up the pieces when the plan backfires and
yeah,
shatters apart. Right? You choose to do something, it doesn't work. Now you're responsible for it. No one owes you a living, and you should clean up after yourself.
yeah,
That's pretty harsh on the surface, but it's exactly what you described earlier, a sense of responsibility. I think you are saying this, both of us are saying this, not to put people down, but to really because we care for people. We want them to
mm,
know that that is the only way that you can move forward, to
yeah,
face yourself courageously and say that, you know what, I failed. It's okay. I'm going to take ownership and responsibility for it. And in that sense that you shared, right, it's scary because that we can have whatever we want, but it also means being fully responsible. I think people don't see that aspect, and we need to really highlight it that yes, in today's world, right, there's a lot of options.
yeah,
But if you want things done your way, and you tell your parents, I want to do this, right, then it also means that you are responsible for whatever that comes out of it. You cannot
yeah,
expect your parents to say, okay, let me pay you up or give you money if you fail.
yeah,
So that's really crucial. I think that's a very good discussion that we had on ownership. Last two questions, okay?
yeah,
Before we end this, the first thing is okay. I want to talk a little bit about the downside of ambition, okay? Things like burnout, attachments, because yes, working hard is important, having ownership, intentionality,
yeah.
but there are times where, uh, there are case studies where people who have gone into mental health issues or suffer burnout because of that ambition to want to progress. How do you then guard against that personally, and what would you advise? Yeah.
I think it comes back again to intentionality because a lot of the time the discourse online, right, is focused on success as measured by monetary terms. Because I mean,
Mm,
we live in a city, we live in a capitalistic economy, if I may say, right? So the thing is, we measure everything based on money. How good you are depends on what? How good your grades are, which is reflective of the school you'll go to, which is reflective of the job you'll get, which is reflective of how much money you can make. That's how we measure success in
yep.
a city, right? But you have to really take a step back and be intentional about what success means to you, right? There have been studies done that after 120K USD per year, the level of happiness doesn't actually increase as you gain more and more money. Because
Mm,
with 120K, which is about like what, 180 or 200K Sing dollars, that, yeah, I mean, that's still a significant, comfortable amount of money. But the thing is, after that, why do we aim for millions of dollars when our happiness doesn't actually increase proportionately to that growth,
mm,
right? So it's like after a certain level where you can eat wherever you want, where you can have staycations wherever you want, where you can travel comfortably, where you can drive around, what else is there in life, right? Travel more, but then you don't have enough annual leave, for example, right? Or you have too many responsibilities, right? So you have
yep.
to really define for yourself, what do I want out of life, right? And I think a lot of people later on in life or unexpectedly in life where their health or someone that they know faces a critical point, right? That's when you realize that, hey, none of this matters, right? But you don't have to get there to realize that none of this actually matters. And money is not the only thing that matters. You
It's
don't
very,
have to get there.
it's
You
very
can
interesting. Okay.
live vicariously, right, through
Yeah.
other people's story. And you know enough super, super rich people in their autobiographies that they're actually maybe not happy, right? Conversely, you know a lot of people who are not that financially able, but are actually very happy and fulfilled. So when we talk about things like mental health, emotional health, relationships, all these facets of life that are super important to most people, you have to write it down literally on a piece of paper. And the best time to start is when you're not actually that financially successful yet, where you don't have that many responsibilities, to
Mm,
set out, this is what I want for my life.
okay.
I want 25% to be on work, 25% family, 25% social, and 25% for me, my own
Mm-hmm.
emotional and mental health, right? And if that's your plan, then you gotta proportion your resources, including time, accordingly, right?
Right.
So
Right.
this day, if I have 10 waking hours, I'm going to spend 2.5
Yeah. Yeah.
on work, 2.5 on family, 2.5 meeting friends, and 2.5 on my mental well-being, right?
Sure.
Journaling or meditation or whatnot. So it doesn't have to be that split, but this is just an example, right? So
Yeah.
if you value your mental health, then you got to invest in it. anything that you invest in will grow better, right?
Right.
If you don't invest in something, it won't grow. It'll just stay
Yeah.
stuck. So it's not a surprise that if you focus excessively on work for 5 years or even 10 years, that everything else suffers because you're spending 95% of your time on work and 5% for everything else, right? So
Yeah.
is it really a surprise that your relationships have been draining? You and your partner are always arguing, your mental health is like the worst it's ever been. It's not a surprise because you didn't grow it, right? It's like a tree. If you don't water it, it will die. On the other hand, when you water it, it will grow. It's not rocket science.
Okay.
So it's just about reverse engineering that process to make sure that what you want, you actually stick to it and you actually invest in it, as opposed to just saying, oh, I wish I had better mental health. I wish I had better, resilience, for example.
Well, that's a really solid answer. It's a really again, I didn't expect. I'm keep getting surprised by your answers because intentionality again seems to be a theme here, and it is applicable even in this context, right? Like how you don't just one area is great and then the rest just crashes. It is difficult to do sometimes, I guess, because people only change when there's pain. Um, but I guess maybe from your perspective about being intentional a bit at the beginning, it's really useful because like you said, success is how you define it. I think we've been discussing for so long, right? People listening to this, they might misinterpret us as saying, okay, wow, you need to work really hard to be successful and make a lot of money. But I'm glad that we managed to qualify it now and say that success is up to you to define.
Yeah.
Outcome is up to you to define, right? It's really different for different people. And the reason why mental health is a challenge now is because of a very limited definition of success or how we impose definitions of success on ourselves,
Yeah.
especially youth, right? And then when you cannot get it, they get anxious with anxiety. So that is interesting. I was hosting Dr. Chi Tun John as well. He actually talked about this exactly similar to your point of redefining success.
Yeah.
Okay, last question we need to talk about is something also I think you've been quite outspoken on. It's on success and stereotypes. So
Mm.
you wrote, I think, an article on LinkedIn, even on Instagram as well. I think you went pretty viral, at least there were a lot of reactions and impressions. And you wrote that you achieve many things in your life. You put in a lot of effort, you put in a lot of thought process. But people sometimes they only look at the superficial. They only look at your appearance and say that you have a pretty face, right? And you wrote that you loathe it. Actually, when I read that, I felt like, wow, that's a really strong word. I have not seen that word used in a very long time. The last time I saw it used was in a literature book, and that person really loved the other person. So, could you, yeah, just explain, share with us the emotions, right? Like,
Yeah.
what led you to write that? How you felt?
Mm. I think it really led me to write that because of what I experienced, right? So, like, to give
Mm,
some context, basically, yeah, I wrote that, I had excelled in sports, I had excelled
mm,
in, school, work, certain things, but then it all came back to, oh, yeah, of course you achieved it because you have a pretty face or because you look a certain way. So, of course, you achieve success. I mean, this statement is clearly not true because there are lots of people who are super good looking, but wouldn't necessarily say they're successful. But let's not go there, right? The main point is that I don't loathe, by the way, I don't hate the way I look. In fact, I'm very thankful for it, and there have been benefits that come out of looking pleasant or pleasant looking things, not just humans, things in general, right? So the part that I dislike is it's when people attribute certain other successes or certain other qualities like hard work, integrity, and all that,
mm,
and conflate it with the way I look, right? Just to be clear, I love my brains. I love the fact that I'm creative. I also love the way I look. I
yeah.
mean, I was born this way. And I've learned to appreciate myself in different ways, right? The thing that I hate is not that, oh, I look this way. No, I don't. I appreciate myself for the different forms that I
Mm,
that I come in, right?
sure.
But the part that I hate is when people conflate it and attribute everything to this one aspect. So I don't know if you've heard of the halo effect, which is that there's one trait, right, that's so
Yeah.
distinct. You have such a distinct trait, right? Oftentimes people use the example of, oh, someone's very handsome. That's why they're rich. That's why they got
Got it.
friends. That's why they got
Yeah.
network. That's why they got all these other things. But it can be used on the flip side as well, where if you work really hard, right, all the other things are not really seen, right? It's just seen as, oh, because you're like this,
Mm,
therefore all these other things.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's the part that I feel it's been really difficult. And I mean, I could go on for this for hours, right? But traditionally, women didn't do business, especially in Asia. So that's one, right? And being in tech, being in the entrepreneurial scene in
Yeah.
Singapore, the entrepreneurship scene, it's a lot of
Dominated.
time is
Yeah.
digital businesses, a lot of time is tech, right? It's male
Yeah.
dominated
Yeah.
as a society, especially in the entrepreneurship space. And I'm
Yeah.
saying like heads up to all the female entrepreneurs out there, because I do believe that in order to overcome certain social stigmas, right? Whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's sexual orientation, to be able to excel in society, that
Yeah.
takes extra work. That's what I believe, right?
Got it.
That you got to put in some extra work sometimes. And I think that's the part where I want people to be aware of, that it goes back to my first point, right? Which
Yeah.
is, I can't stand when people think that there's only one way of doing things. People are multifaceted. The world is so diverse. There's so many countries, cultures, different types of things, right? So what makes us all think that it has to be this one way, right? It has to be either this or this, you know. It has to be either male or female. It either has to be brains or beauty,
Got it. Yeah.
this or that. You know, I don't like how dichotomous it is. And when
Yeah.
people can't see outside of the binary, it really restricts your worldview.
Okay, I think everything is linked, right? As you were speaking, there were so many things that were coming to my mind. I think the most immediate thing you were mentioning about dichotomy, and it is true that dichotomies separate and it leads to conflict, black and white thinking, right? And again, it leads to attribution, like people, it's kind of a cop out saying that, hey, you know, you're beautiful and that's why you have added opportunities and therefore you have it better in life, which again, there's some truth to it, but it's not the full truth. I think you do acknowledge that, hey, no, research has shown that attractiveness is a factor in persuasion, but that's not the only equation. And also, by doing that, they're also giving them an excuse to say, "Ah, you know what, I'm not going to try because this person is just like that because of this." And again, I probably cannot empathize with you completely fully because I probably don't get that. but I will say that the best way I can empathize with that is when I do something really well
Mm,
and I put in a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of factors go into it, and
yeah,
they attribute it to something else completely, right? Or you're just smart or whatever lah. They attribute it to something else, and they invalidate the work that you
yeah.
put in, and they don't see that work and the value you have beyond that.
Mm,
That said, also right, I found it interesting that I think after you posted that reflection, and then you did a series of selfies, right? Where
mm,
you talked about a certain concept. And then I kind of, the funny thing is that when I looked at that, right? And
yeah.
with the context of what you shared previously, I kind of had a hunch that somebody will pick that up. And because of that imperfect thinking, will pick that up. And I was right. I was right. So somebody picked that up and said that, hey, you know what? Like, if let's say you believe that, yes, I don't want to be just I don't want to just be looked at for my looks, right? Then
Mm.
why are you posting a series of selfies, which is a very flawed argument, lah. But maybe maybe you want to discuss about that as well, your response to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Actually, a lot of the times I actually don't think that. And I said this in my post as well. A lot of times I just
Mm,
ignore hate because I don't think people owe it to me to understand where I come from if they don't know me, right?
mm,
They're perfectly able to just judge on the surface because that's all they know, and it's not unfair for them to do that. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, right?
yeah,
But the reason why I responded to this is because I feel that there can be, and I'm not out there to shame the person, which is why I like their name.
yeah,
Um, but the reason why I shared it is because I feel that there's something very important to learn from it, right? Which is that, again, back to my point, things don't have to be viewed as this or that, A or B. There are other options, right? And to be clear, when I posted that initial first post talking about, how, my success was conflated with my face and all of that,
mm,
I want to make this point super clear, right? Which is not that I don't like the way I look.
yeah,
Right? It's that I don't like my achievements to be conflated with the way I look, right?
got
So
it.
the way I look, I love it. I love my physical appearance. I love my mental, critical, analytical thinking. I love my emotional capacity, and I love different parts of myself,
Mm,
right? And so I want to embrace these parts equally. I will not conform to society saying that, hey, if you want to talk about business and mindset, you can't show your face, right?
mm,
'Cause otherwise, people will conflate it. Why do people have to conflate it? Why can I not show my face, but yet the value that I give is so impactful that if you act on it, it will literally be a better use of your time and bring you more business than you commenting on,
okay,
certain other
exactly.
things.
And it goes
right?
back to dichotomy as well.
Yeah, and I want to put it out there intentionally because I think that you can look beautiful and also be super smart and add value at the same time.
Right.
And
I
I
get
don't
it.
want to conform to society's view of, oh, if you are smart, you have to look like a professor with glasses and you have to wear a suit jacket and all these things. I just don't believe in that. That is not me. I love
Sure.
fashion. I love makeup. I love looking good. I love aesthetic things.
Got it.
That's part
Got
of
it.
it. But I also love
Yeah.
business. I love strategy. I love critical thinking. I love connecting the
Got
dots.
it. Yeah.
That's also me. And so like the me that you see online, right? That's really me. Like that's what you get.
Right.
You're
That's
not gonna get a cleaned up version of a bimbo. You're also not gonna get some nerd that has to look a certain way for it to be socially acceptable. Right?
Yeah. Wow. That was actually the perfect response to it. Like, I cannot have put it any better. Like in my head, I was thinking that would be the response that I would give also. But you really put it really beautifully. I think. But I would say I would qualify. I would also say if I may share my perspective, right, is that this is just my perspective, right? That there has to be some awareness of the social and cultural situation to operate with intention because it's again this one is something that you can possibly disagree on as well, but I actually had the exact same thinking as you when I was first started out in business, right? I want, me, right? Like I have my vision is for people to see who they are inside regardless of the physical appearance, right? To care about the content of their character,
Yeah.
and not just their appearance, right? So when I first went to business, right, I did not care about my appearance at all. So my hair was messy. I was wearing nonsense. And then my mentor was telling me, Kevin, you need to like clean up your appearance. Then I told him like, I believe that people should not judge me my appearance. So like I stand for that. So therefore, I'm not going to change my appearance.
Yeah.
So what he said was that it's kind of like in a way similar. What he said was that if that's the case, right, if you really believe in that, why not you just like walk around naked and just like do it? Because you don't care about outer appearance, but I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example, but the point I was trying to make is that when we want to change paradigms, we ironically have to function within paradigms sometimes.
Yeah.
If it's too extreme, people reject it. There's cognitive dissonance, and then you cannot get your message across anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's something to think about, lah. But I do get you. I do know that you have that balance and you are aware of that as well. And I feel that you are personally. I just feel that the way you're doing it, especially looking at socials, is a great balance. Yeah, and yeah, yeah. But you get my point, right?
Yeah, I do get your
Mhm.
point. And to this point, right, can I say it's quite
Yeah,
funny because it's not like um I'm posting pictures in like for example a bikini, right?
yeah.
Then that's like a bit more
Okay,
controversial.
sure.
That's out of a business context, right? Everybody has an IC photo. Everybody on their employee pass in a corporate wall has a photo of their face, right?
Mm,
So I'm just bringing this online. And the funny thing is that, right? And I'm not shaming anyone based on how they look, but if
mm,
someone who looks differently, not socially acceptable, post a series of selfies, somehow that doesn't matter, right?
mm,
Somehow that's socially acceptable. Somehow
mm,
that's not you trying to sell your face. I'm just putting it out there
mm,
as what is socially acceptable and what is not often is very, very gray, right?
mm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's I learned. Oh, that's okay. I keep saying that I learn a lot from you, which is true, lah. I really do enjoy listening to your thought processes.
Oh, that's
But
good
we
to know.
do we do have to end this because I know you have another appointment and you cannot
Yeah.
stand tardiness. So I'll leave with my last question. Last question. What do you want to be known or appreciated for?
I want to be known for allowing people to transform their ideas into something real. And I think that's the whole inspiration behind my program name, right? Which is the idea to execution. Because
Mm,
my fundamental belief is this: humans are multifaceted. Again, there's not just one way of doing things. We can be, like someone can be a banker, a bisexual, a dancer, and a painter, and a father at the same time. They don't just
mm,
have to be bisexual, or they don't just have to be a dad, or they don't just have to be a banker, right? For example.
yep.
So a lot of people have so many things that they like, so many things that they want to explore, different facets of their personality. And I feel like a lot of times as millennials, we feel crippled and we feel like we cannot do that because we're just lost. Like, I like this, I want to do this, but I don't know how. And
Mm,
I believe that the way you transform a wish or dream into reality is by taking actions in the real world, in real life, however small they may be, right? If they're just one tiny step closer towards your goal, you'll wake up 10 years later finding that you're actually halfway or more towards your goal, right?
mm,
It's kind of like reach for the stars, land on the moon kind of thing. Um, and I want to be able to help people build that confidence, not through saying, hey, you can do it, you know, you're so special, but allowing them to take concrete actions in tiny steps that they can actually see that makes a difference, that gives them that confidence because they can see the real life effect rather than just,
mm,
I'm not saying like motivational speeches are not great, but people will really only, I can tell you all I want, right? But you'll only believe me when you see it for yourself, that change in your life or that tangible change in yourself, right? So I want to be able to empower people in this sense by taking concrete actions.
got
So
it.
transforming an idea, showing you that that's not impossible, you can actually do something about it, and here's exactly how. And
Mm,
then when you get there and you gain confidence, like that's something that gives me like immense satisfaction to see.
sure.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful end to this podcast. Once again, if you enjoy this, listening to this, definitely follow Janice on social media, on Instagram. Watch some of her YouTube videos as well. And yeah, if you're considering starting a business or getting some thought processes, taking small steps like what Janice mentioned, I do believe that her services will be useful to you. So do check it out. Free as a free consultation, right? So they
Yeah.
can just drop you out.
Yeah.
That's nice. All right. With that, I guess we've come to the end of this podcast. Stay tuned, subscribe for more episodes. We are ramping up our content in the next year, and I'm also getting a partner to come and help me with editing. So do subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay resilient, stay intentional, and yeah, goodbye.